What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture. It's a place of history. It's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution.
For the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg, for me, is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment and what I saw these young African Americans doing was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
an ode to the Bronx. Praise this morning, how my feet hit the ground with a sense of purpose, how the wind hugged me, kissed me on the cheek like abuela, how it ran its fingers through my hair and told me to stay forever. Praise me, and how I have to stop myself before spewing out harsh words of hate towards everything I've ever known, every house I've made into home. I can't control it. Can't cool it down like 75-cent coffee, can't slow down BX41 bus rides. I don't hate the Bronx. I hate that I can't win dance battles against Showtime performers on the D train. I hate that people put your name and my childhood and my mother's sacrifice at the back of their minds like somehow they can make us go away, like somehow they can bury my mother and brother without singing their song, say the Bronx with respect, something the black boys on my block died for, say it like how you say Manhattan is the heart of the city, like there aren't more parts to a body, say it like how you say I talk white and I don't look like I'm from the Bronx. Praise my upstairs neighbors, how their chants and loud roars rise the sun into the sky, commanding its sunlight to shine another day, how I join them with my broomstick, pounding to the beat of my own drum. Praise my deformed family tree, how I call the bodega owner my brother, the old lady on the 6th floor grandma, 8 a.m. classmates my kin, and the lunch guy Uncle Jimmy. Praise our song, our way of crafting wicked curses, the path we carve in solid concrete, how we make gardens bloom in broken buildings. Praise our eternity and way of taking history into our own hands, how brown girls from the Bronx aren't supposed to write poetry, but I did it anyways. Thank you.
Let's just give one more round of applause to Alondra Uribe. Alondra Uribe is from the Dreamyard Bronx Poetry Project. Good afternoon. How are you? All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Brian Jones. I am the Associate Director of Education here at the Schomburg Center, and it's my distinct privilege and honor to welcome you and to introduce this program. Just a few words about this place. How many people here have been to the Schomburg Center before? All right, okay, very good. And how many people are new? This is your first time setting foot. Okay, all right. Well, let me tell you something. This is, as you heard in actually the film is now inaccurate. We have over 11 million items related to Black and diasporic history here. And everything that's here, everything that's kept here and held here is available to you for free to look at. We just got Malcolm X's manuscript, you may have heard. And it has his markings, and it has Alex Haley's markings on top of those markings, and his markings back on those markings. That will be interesting to look at. We also have the missing chapter of Malcolm X's autobiography that's never before been seen, but now you can see it for free with your New York Public Library card. So welcome, you're in an amazing place. And my job, many people who know me from my days as a teacher, I used to teach elementary school here in Harlem, or know me from the CUNY Graduate Center, where I recently was a student, no longer. People who know me from other walks of life say, Brian, what are you doing at the Schomburg? So let me just take 30 seconds and tell you what I'm doing now that I'm here. I'm in charge of everything that we do that has to do, actually everything we do has to do with education, but I'm in charge of everything we do that has to do with teachers and students in some formal and informal capacities. So how many people here are teachers in the room? All right, thank you teachers for coming. Well, I want you each and every one of you to memorize my email address. It's brianjones@nypl.org. Please write to me because we want to be of service to you. We provide professional development for teachers. We show you how to use the collections here at the Schomburg in your classrooms. We have tours. How many people here have seen our Black Power exhibit that's up now? Okay, many of you haven't, you need to take a little trip on your way out of here because it's closing at the end of this month and it's been up for 2 years. I'm in charge of fellowship programs. We do public programs like this, professional development, as I said, and some summer programming as well. So there's a lot that's going on here, and much of it is available to you and to your students. So please, please come. And I'm thrilled today to introduce 4 editors and authors of this fantastic volume, Teaching for Black Lives, which has recently been published by Rethinking Schools. And I should say that after this event is over, we're going to have a book signing in the back, in the Langston Hughes lobby as you leave. So if you haven't gotten a copy, please visit the Schomburg shop where it is on sale. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, there's no photography during this program. We have a photographer who will be there he is, who's taking pictures right now to help us record and memorialize the event. And this is also being live streamed and recorded online. So if you have friends or if you want to come back and revisit it, you can just Google Schomburg live stream and there will be the link. One last story is a story about Arturo Schomburg, the founder of this place. I've been searching in the footnotes to try to figure out if this is true. It's been repeated so many times, it's one of those stories that probably just should be true. But the story goes that when Arturo Schomburg, who was born in Puerto Rico, by the way, when he was in an elementary school class, he asked his teacher, like, when are we going to get around to Black history? And his teacher told him, there's no such thing. So, moving on. And Schomburg was a part of all kinds of revolutionary nationalist movements. He came as a political activist here to New York City at the turn of the century. And those, Puerto Rican independence and that sort of thing, when they didn't pan out, he took to book collecting. And he began, some say, in response to that teacher's comment, he began collecting items that had to do with the African diaspora all over the world, proving his teacher wrong. In 1926, the New York Public Library purchased his collection from him for $1 an item, and he had 10,000 items that he had collected with his own money. Unfortunately, though, in 2018, there are probably still many classrooms, we all know, where there is no Black history being taught. In 2018, almost 100 years later, more than 100 years later for Arturo Schomburg's experience, there are students having the exact same experience. That is, they are growing up with a warped and twisted fairy tale view of this country's history. Now, more than ever, I think we have to insist that Black history is not only American history, but it's world history, and everybody needs to know it. Anyway, I could go on, but I want to get to our guests. So let me just say a little bit about them. We're very excited to have these editors and authors of Teaching for Black Lives here. Let me say all of their names, and then they'll come out, and we'll begin the program. And while you're listening to them, keep your thoughts and questions and comments in mind, because I'll reappear and moderate a discussion that we can have together. You'll have a chance to speak your mind and to speak with them. Diane Watson is an editor at Rethinking Schools and an assistant professor in teacher education at Lewis and Clark Graduate School of Education and Counseling. She's also the co-editor of the popular book for students, Rhythm and Resistance, Teaching Poetry for Social Justice. Adam Sanchez is a teacher at Harvest Collegiate High School in New York City and a curriculum writer and organizer with the Zinn Education Project. Jesse Hagopian is the first ethnic studies teacher at Garfield High School in Seattle. He is also an editor at Rethinking Schools and the co-editor of the book More Than a Score, The New Uprising Against High-Stakes Testing. And lastly, but certainly not least, sorry, refer to my notes. We have Renee Watson, an author, educator, and activist. Her young adult novel, Piecing Me Together, received a Newbery Honor and Coretta Scott King Award. She's the founder also of the I2 Arts Collective, a nonprofit housed in the brownstone where Langston Hughes lived and created. So please welcome these editors and authors of Teaching for Black Lives. Just come on up.
Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. I'm from Oregon, and when I say good afternoon, they just look at me. 15-year-old black student Kobe Byrne was sitting in geography class outside of Houston in the fall of 2015. As he read the assigned page of his textbook, he noticed something that deeply disturbed him: a map of the United States with a caption that said, "The Atlantic slave trade brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations." Kobe took a picture of his textbook and texted it to his mother, adding, "We was real hard workers, wasn't we?" along with a sarcastic emoji. Not only had the McGraw-Hill textbook replaced the word slave with workers, they also placed a chapter on the enslavement of Africans in the chapter of the book titled Patterns of Immigration, as if Africans at that time willfully came to the United States looking for a better life. By the way, all of the art that you will see is from our book, Teaching for Black Lives. In October of 2015, a black girl in South Carolina was ripped out of her desk and thrown across the room by a police officer in the school for allegedly refusing to put away her cell phone. The video captured by a classmate of the incident went viral. The officer who brutalized the girl was not charged with a crime, and instead, both the girl videotaping and the girl thrown across the room were arrested and charged with disturbing schools. And on June 16, 2018, I posted on Facebook the following: "Yesterday, my 8-year-old son told me he hated being black. From being compared to poop, to having his hair fondled and examined as if he were a rare specimen from outer space or a walking museum, he's growing weary of being the only one, and so early in life. He needs black teachers to affirm his dignity and worth as a black man and as a regular human being." Scratch that. He needs his teachers to do this, all of them. Our work, Teaching for Black Lives, is a direct response to the movement for Black lives and our desire to disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. We wanted to provide educators with critical perspectives on the role of schools in perpetuating anti-blackness and offer them concrete examples of what it looks like to humanize black people in curriculum, teaching, and policy. Throughout the book, we demonstrate how teachers can connect the curriculum to young people's lives and root their concerns in daily experiences in what is taught and how classrooms are set up. We also highlight the hope and beauty of student activism and collective action. Besides the incredible art, the beauty of the book is that it makes the invisible visible. And we see this collection as playing an important role in highlighting the ways educators can and should make their classrooms and schools sites of resistance to white supremacy and anti-blackness, as well as sites for knowing the hope and beauty in blackness. And with that in mind, I'd like to read you portions of one of the chapters titled Letter from a Black Mom to Her Son. As a parent to black boys, I worry about sending them to schools that over-enroll black boys into special ed and criminalize them at younger and younger ages, and view them as negative statistics on the dark side of the achievement gap. At the same time, I sometimes bathe in the hope and advancement that is possible through education. Dear Caleb, for 3 years of my K-8 schooling, from 7:40 a.m. until 3:05 p.m., I was black and invisible. I was bused across town to integrate a white school in southeast Portland, Oregon. We arrived at school promptly at 7:30 and had 10 full minutes before the white children arrived. We spent that time roaming the halls, happy, free, normal. Once the white children arrived, we became black and invisible. We were separated so that no more than 2 of us were in a class at a time. I never saw black people in our textbooks unless they were in shackles or standing with Martin Luther King Jr. Most of us rarely interacted with a black adult outside of the aide who rode the bus with us. I liked school and I loved learning, but I never quite felt right or good. I felt very black and obvious because I knew that my experience was different from that of my peers. But I also felt invisible because this was never acknowledged in any meaningful way. I became visible again at 3:05 when I got back on the bus with the other brown faces to make our journey home. Caleb, I want your teachers to help you love being in your skin. I want them to make space for you in their curricula so that you see yourself as integral to this country's history, to your classroom's community, to your peers' learning. I want your teachers to select materials where blacks are portrayed in ordinary and extraordinary ways that actively challenge stereotypes and biases. Most of all, Caleb, I want your teachers to know you so they can help you grow. As mentioned, when I was in middle school, I lived on the other side of town and was bussed in as part of the distorted way that Portland school authorities decided to integrate the schools. We would get up at 6 in order to eat breakfast and walk to the bus stop in time. It took us a half hour to get to school. Once there, I had to constantly code switch, learn how not to be overly black, and be better than my white counterparts. Caleb, I want your teachers to know your journey to school, metaphorically and physically. I want them to see you and all of your peers as children from good families. I don't want you to have to earn credit because of whom you're related to or what your parents do for a living. And I don't want your teachers to think that you're special because you have a family that cares about you and is involved in your life. I want them to know that all children are part of families, traditional or not, that help shape and form who they are. As a youngster once, my elementary school held a back-to-school night that featured student work and allowed families to walk the halls and speak with teachers. In each classroom was a student leader, chosen by the teacher. At one point, a couple came in, desiring to speak with my teacher, Mrs. S. She was busy, so I thought I'd chat with them while they waited. As I approached them, they recoiled in fear and with panicked looks turned away from me and said, "Mrs. S?" My teacher looked away from the folks she was working with and said, "It's okay. She's not like the rest." I don't remember what happened next. All I remember is that this seemed to be one of the first in a long line of reassurances that I was special and not like other black boys and girls. For many years afterward, I was told on more than one occasion, "You're not like other blacks." This was supposed to be a compliment. Caleb, I pray that your teachers will not look at you through hurtful racial preconceptions. I pray that they will do the work necessary to eliminate racist practices in themselves and in those around them. I pray that they stand up for you in ways that leave you feeling strong and capable. I pray that they will nurture your spirit and that you, in turn, will desire to be a better you. Caleb, I hope that you will have teachers who realize they are gatekeepers. I hope they understand the power they hold and work to discover your talents, seek out your dreams and fan them rather than smother them. I hope they will see you as part of a family with gifts and rich histories that have been passed down to you. I hope they will strive to know you, even when they think they already know you. I hope your teachers will approach you with humility and stay curious about who you are. Son, I end this letter by sharing a story that Grandma has told me many times that I hope will one day resonate with you. On the first day of kindergarten, many of the kids were crying and clinging to their parents. Not me. I was ready. I wanted to be like my 3 older siblings and go to school. So I gave my mom a hug, let go of her hand, waved goodbye, and found my teacher. And remember how I told you that my oldest sister taught me how to read before I went to school? The teacher found this out and used this skill, along with my desire to be at school, to teach the other kids the alphabet and help them learn how to read. I believe in part that is why I became a teacher. She saw something in me and encouraged me to develop my passion, even at this young, sweet age. That, my son, is my hope for you. I hope your teachers will love you for who you are and the promise of what you'll be. Love, Mama. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. That was really wonderful. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here today. My name is Jesse Hagopian, teach ethnic studies at Garfield High School, and I can tell you that there is a battle raging for the story that will be told about Black history, about our students in our classrooms. And I want to talk a little bit about that battle and the growing movement to transform our schools that's become known as the Black Lives Matter at School movement. And I think one of the best ways to frame this battle is actually to look at what Malcolm X said when he wrote, when we send our children to schools in this country, they learn nothing about us other than we used to be cotton pickers. Why, your grandfather was Nat Turner. Your grandfather was Toussaint Louverture. Your grandfather was Hannibal, right? And he might have added your grandmother was Sojourner Truth and Ella Baker and Rosa Parks, right? But the American history lessons that we get on Black people are atrocious. I mean, we had Trump yesterday giving America a history lesson praising Robert E. Lee, right? We have Kanye West calling for the abolition of the 13th Amendment. We could get rid of the loophole in that amendment that allows for unfree labor in prisons, but calling for getting rid of the 13th Amendment that abolished chattel slavery is truly ignorant. And that's, I think, one of the impetuses of us wanting to come together and start a new conversation about Black history and Black identity with this book, Teaching for Black Lives. And you only have to look at what the alternative is to our book to know how urgent it is that we have these discussions in the classroom. You heard from Diane about the textbook that Kobe Burren was reading in Texas. Okay, so some people write off the South and they say, that's just Texas. So let's take a look at this textbook from Connecticut. This textbook was used in the Connecticut public schools all the way up through last year. The Connecticut Adventure, 4th grade text. And this girl came home with this piece of homework to talk about slavery. And the question she was asked was, how were the slaves treated in Connecticut? And she wrote, originally, slaves were treated badly and cruelly. They were treated like animals and goods, but you see she crossed that out. And then she wrote, slaves were treated like members of the family, and her mom saw that piece of homework and said, why did you cross out the right answer? She said, Mom, that's not the right answer. Look, it says it right here. Connecticut did not have many slaves. Some people owned 1 or 2 slaves. They often cared and protected for them like members of the family. They taught them to be Christian and sometimes to read and write, like they were doing us a favor here. Thankfully, both that textbook in Texas was challenged by that mother, and they got the online version of it changed. Of course, there's already thousands of those McGraw-Hill textbooks across the country in classrooms, right? This textbook they finally removed. This happened in Texas also. A teacher gave their students in 8th grade this assignment, The Life of a Slave, a Balanced View. This was last year. So on the one side, they have the positive aspects and then the negative aspects. Now this child here is going to be the next director of the Schomburg Museum. Because they said, not applicable. Right? Excellent work, A+ there. But as irresponsible as this teacher was, as horrific a lesson that this was from this teacher, as traumatic as that is, right, to put on black children to list what was good about the raping and enslavement, that the brutality that happened, we can't just put it on that teacher, because we have to look at this corporate industry that is putting these ideas out across the country and asking educators to reproduce these racist lies. Look at this. Prentice Hall, A History of the United States. Now, if you look down at the bottom, it says, "Many may not have been terribly unhappy with their lot, for they knew no other." This is what's being taught in our schools. This textbook comes from my own high school, world history textbook. And here you see again the legacy of colonial rule. They're talking about Africa. Well, let's talk about the negative, and then let's balance that out with the positive aspects of colonialism. But I want to suggest to you tonight that it's not just black minds that are under assault, it's also black bodies that are under assault in our school. You heard about the girl who was ripped from her desk and thrown across the room. But it's also the systematic zero-tolerance discipline policies that are pushing our black and brown children out of the schools. And so the suspension and expulsion rates are off the charts for black students. We could look at any number of studies that show the disproportionate discipline of black students. This is just from my own school district. In K-5, right, you can see the disproportionality. In 6 through 12, black students are suspended at 7 times the rate. And nationally, the statistics are that high as well. And one thing we should be aware of is it often gets framed as it's just black boys who are being targeted, and the black aggressive nature of boys is what's being targeted. But when you look at the study and you drill down, you need to understand that it's actually black girls that are the most disproportionately suspended in the public schools across the country. And you can see that narrative of the angry black woman that's been constructed. You only had to watch the tennis match with Serena Williams to know how that narrative plays out in our society. And when that happens in a classroom with a black girl who has far less power, right, you can see the way they're being scapegoated in our classrooms. If you haven't read Monique Morris's book, Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in School, I highly recommend it. And there's an interview with Monique Morris in our book, Teaching for Black Lives, that I recommend that everyone check out. Now, I want to suggest to you that the curriculum, coupled with zero-tolerance discipline, is a driver of the school-to-prison pipeline. When students don't see themselves reflected in their curriculum, they often check out. And then they get labeled defiant, right? But maybe we should recategorize that defiance as actually resistance to a racist school system and curriculum that is whitewashing their experience and leaving their history and culture out. And then when they get labeled defiant, they get caught up in the zero-tolerance discipline policies that push them out of school. Then they're more likely not to pass that class. Then they're more likely not to graduate. Then they're more likely not to get a job. And then they're far more likely to end up in our mass incarceration system in this country. But there's one last part of it that I want to highlight here, which is the high-stakes testing aspect of it. There's a really important study that came out of Boston University that shows that those exit exams that are the gatekeeper of high school graduation are a major contributor to the school-to-prison pipeline. That in fact, a student that does wonderfully in school, their teachers say that they have met all the requirements for graduation, but they don't pass that one test produced by Pearson or some other massive testing behemoth, then they don't get to graduate, right? And we know the outcomes of our students who don't have that diploma. So there's a movement to change that. The high-stakes testing, the opt-out movement, and the refusal movement. but there's also the School to Justice pipeline that we are envisioning in the Black Lives Matter at School movement. And I just want to end by saying a word about what this movement is and the potential for this movement. It's in its current iteration, I'm proud to say it started in my hometown of Seattle at an elementary school, where this school had teachers who had been doing professional development around racial justice for several years. And they decided the beginning of the year, 2 school years ago, they would have a celebration of their black students' lives near the beginning of the school year. So the art teacher designed a beautiful t-shirt that said, "Black Lives Matter, we stand together," with a tree in the middle. And they got a community organization, Black Men United, to change the narrative, to come and invite parents to come high-five all the kids on the way into the building that day, and then have a wonderful ceremony and celebration that day on the inside. The problem is, once the media found out that the teachers were going to wear shirts that said Black Lives Matter, the hate mail started coming into the school, and then some particularly hateful person made a bomb threat on an elementary school for the audacity of those educators to declare that their black students' lives have value. And so the event was canceled officially by the Seattle School District because of that threat, and those brave educators and parents, though, held it anyway. It was a lot smaller than it would have been, and that saddened me. So I went and spoke with those teachers, and I said, "How can we support you? This is an outrage." And we came up with the idea, what if we did this at every single school across Seattle? What if every school wore Black Lives Matter shirts to school? Right? They can't threaten us all. And so we passed the resolution in our union. But then I thought, well, okay, we passed the resolution, but come October 19th on our Black Lives Matter at School Day, how many teachers are really going to put that shirt on and publicly declare? And then the t-shirt orders started coming in, first by the hundreds, and then the thousands. We had some 3,000 educators in the Seattle Public Schools come to school with that shirt on, ready to teach about institutional racism that day. An overwhelming victory for our movement in Seattle. Thank you. And partly it was sparked by the Garfield football team that was taking it, one of the first high schools where the entire team took a knee at the same time to protest police brutality. And there was that beautiful day at my high school where the teachers were wearing the shirts and speaking out. And this really launched something nationally. And so the teachers in Philly saw us on the news, and they said, we can take that day and we can expand it into a whole week, right? And then teachers in Rochester took it up. And then last school year, we actually got together and started planning nationally on national conference calls to get ready for a whole week of Black Lives Matter at School Week for the first week of February, where we broke down the 13 principles of the Black Lives Matter Global Network into teaching points for each day of the week. So that on Monday we could teach about restorative justice, and on Tuesday we could teach about global black diaspora, and on Wednesday we could teach about black LGBTQ people, and then on Thursday we could teach about the global village and black families, and on Friday we could teach about black women, right? And an incredible curriculum developed and movement developed out of that, and we had 3 major demands of this movement. End zero tolerance discipline and replace it with restorative justice, mandate black history and ethnic studies classes, and hire more black teachers. I'm proud to say that I'm teaching one of the first ethnic studies courses in the Seattle Public Schools as a result of a coalition of incredibly inspiring educators like Tracy Castro-Gill partnering with the NAACP and the Black Lives Matter at School movement that was able to force this movement onto the Seattle School District that's now launching ethnic studies programs in Seattle. And yes. Thank you. I'll just end by saying that I'm incredibly excited for this year's Black Lives Matter at School action. The first week of February, starting February 4th on Rosa Parks' birthday, we need to celebrate by bringing these lessons into our classrooms and then bringing this movement to our local school board. On the Wednesday, the 6th, we're asking everybody to rally at the school board around these demands. And this is what it can look like, right? Here was the rally in Philadelphia last year for Black Lives Matter at School Week. Here is the rally in Washington, D.C. around this week. In Vermont, the students decided that they were going to raise the Black Lives Matter flag right up there alongside the American flag in front of their school, right? So all across the country, this movement is growing, and it would be beautiful to see you all here in New York take it to the next level and transform the public school system so that it's about empowering black students rather than reproducing institutional racism. Thank you so much.
Two really hard acts to follow. I want to say this because, Jesse, there's so many amazing things that you're doing that you didn't get a chance to say this, but I know Jesse played a big role in getting both Macklemore and Michael Bennett to buy every single Seattle teacher a copy of this book, and that is huge. And if there's anyone out there who wants to do that for New York City, come talk to us. Most of my articles in the book are around curriculum, and I didn't get a chance to see this when Brian asked, so I'm just going to ask it again. How many teachers are in the audience? Wow, okay, wonderful, all right. So a lot of my articles in the book are about trying to envision what can we do differently? And I think the book begins a conversation about that, and I want to give a little bit of a sense of that. How do we rethink the teaching of black history and black freedom struggle in this country? And before I jump into that, a few caveats. One thing, I'm a history teacher, I'm a US history teacher, so most of what I say is going to deal with that curriculum. But Rethinking Schools and the Teaching for Black Lives book is a much broader project, and there's some great articles in there about incorporating black history into science curriculum. We've got some great stuff around math and, of course, English, of course. And so that's a big caveat there. The other thing I want to say is that although I'm focusing on curriculum, we can't change our schools through changing curriculum alone. A lot of the key demands that Jesse put up there of the Black Lives Matter at School week, right? Our students deserve more black and Latino teachers. That's not going to be changed through curriculum. They deserve resources. Our teachers deserve time to research, experience, develop better curriculum, and all that can't be changed just by changing what you're teaching. These things require massive investments in public schools, which we need to build a movement to demand. But at the same time, I think we can't change our schools without changing the curriculum. And this is, I think, a point that the right wing gets really well, right? As Jesse showed some of the most egregious examples of the corporate textbook. There's also, I know in US history, the Koch brothers fund the Bill of Rights Institute, which is a whole curricular piece. And I think the broader left doesn't get this as well. If anything, I think black parents have gotten this better than any of us, right? Because they understand what is being taught in the classrooms is crucial to this education. I think we got to take up that torch as teachers. So what do we change about the curriculum? First, obviously the content. And Jesse talked about some of the most egregious examples. I think also, particularly in New York, and some of the textbooks you'll see used, it's more insidious, right? It's not quite as overt, but it's absolutely there. So I want to give you an example. I'm in the midst of a unit right now with my students around the question of who freed the slaves, right? And the typical answer everyone gives, Abraham Lincoln, right? And so, of course, they're really shocked to read his first inaugural address, where he basically says, stop freaking out, South. I've never said I'm going to free the slaves in the South. Let me quote one of my public speeches that says, I believe I have no lawful right to do so. I have no inclination to do so. And I'm going to really enforce the fugitive slave law, right? So, and support this original 13th Amendment that would have basically made slavery permanent, right? So it's very different Lincoln than we're taught. But even beyond that, one thing I have never seen in the textbooks, and I'm still waiting to see, is the deeply complicit New York City elite establishment and how deeply complicit that establishment was in slavery. One thing I've never read in a textbook is that when the South seceded, the mayor of New York suggested to the city council that we secede with them, right? And that shows you the deep connections. A lot of the, what I've read, says that for every dollar made off of slavery in the South, there was 40 cents taken to the North, right? And in particular, New York City, the connections of Wall Street, right, to the slavery and the illegal slave trade that was run here well after it was made illegal. So anyway, I could talk about that forever, but that is one example I'm still waiting to see in the textbooks. One of, I think, the pieces in here that I'm most proud of is around Reconstruction. And it's called When Black Lives Matter, Why Teach Reconstruction? And I think this is another area where the corporate textbooks, because they have such a top-down view, get this so wrong. And I think, one thing that has changed is most of them do not still kind of parrot the Dunning school racist trope of Reconstruction, but they do something that I think is still very insidious, which is focus on, when you read a chapter on Reconstruction in the textbooks, almost all of the focus is on the debates between Congress and the president and the white backlash, right? So the whole focus is still on white people, right? And what is missed is the incredible strides that black people were making during Reconstruction. So I just want to read a short section from this piece in the book. And I quote David Rediger here, who wrote this incredible book, Seizing Freedom. He writes, if anything seemed impossible in the 1850s political universe, it was the immediate, unplanned, and uncompensated emancipation of 4 million slaves. And so when this happens, it changes the atmosphere. And here's what I write. When this once seemingly impossible fate became a reality, it democratized and revolutionized U.S. society. It was a moment in which people who had been enslaved became congressmen. It was a moment where a black majority legislature in South Carolina could tax the rich to pay for public schools. It was a moment that spawned the first experiments in black self-determination in the Georgia Sea Islands, where 400 freedmen and women divided up land, planted crops, started schools, and created a democratic system with their own constitution, Congress, Supreme Court, and armed militia. It was a moment where thousands of blacks and poor whites organized together across the South in the union leagues, engaging in strikes, boycotts, demonstrations, and educational campaigns. And it was a moment where other social movements, in particular the labor movement and the feminist movement, drew strength from the inspiring actions of African Americans to secure and define their own freedom. In sum, the Reconstruction era was a moment when black lives, black actions, and black ideas mattered. And I want to bring that up because I think so often when we teach Black history in the curriculum, it's often about victimization. It's these systems of oppression, right? It's about understanding slavery, Jim Crow, and if you're lucky, often not, redlining and mass incarceration. And understanding those systems of oppression is absolutely important, and we need to be teaching that. But also, we need to be teaching the struggle against these things. And here is where we get into, I think, what Brian was talking about Black history is American history. And I often get the opposite question that Mr. Schomburg asks from some of my probably mostly white students would say. I don't have mostly white students, but my mostly white students are asking this question. We seem to learn a lot of Black history in this class. Isn't it a U.S. history class? So I think we need an answer to that, right? And Black history, I think, is American history. It needs to be taught in every U.S. history classroom, not just sidelined into a different course. It's not a sidebar in a corporate textbook, right? It is central to understanding the story of the United States. Right? When we're told Lincoln freed the slaves, this erases the struggle of enslaved people themselves, right, which were key in transforming the Civil War from a war for union to a war against slavery, and it erases one of the biggest social movements in our history, the abolitionist movement, right, which was not just white abolitionists too, right? It was led and pushed to militancy by Black abolitionists. And Reconstruction is another, this similar example where we learn about the backlash and we don't learn about what the backlash was actually backlashing against, right? And so I think, and also I think just one last point on Reconstruction, that point that because the systems used to oppress Black people cut so clearly against the lies the U.S. tells itself, right, that we are about freedom, democracy, and so forth, right, when Black people begin to move in this country, it inspires other social movements. We see that at the end of slavery. We see that again during the civil rights movement. And so this means that if we want to learn how to make social change in this country, if we want informed citizens who are taking action to make a better world, no matter what color you are, you need to know the history of the Black freedom struggle in this country. Now, the last thing I want to say is I think how we teach is also important, right? It's not good enough to just lecture at students an alternative version of history. And we need to rethink the ways that we are teaching, and we need to find engaging ways to bring this history alive in the classroom so students can see the relevance of this history, see themselves as activists, and can learn skills to make change, right? Not just the skills to take a test. And so just one example from the book, that in one of my articles is I have a role play on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, where we have them debate the same questions that SNCC debated at the time, right? And we have them go through organizing campaigns. So you're in Selma, right? Here are the things that are coming up. Where do you stand, right? You're in Lowndes County trying to organize people to vote, right? And debate the questions as they arise so they can begin to see themselves as activists, can see the relevance of these questions for today. And I want to come full circle here because it's not easy to create this kind of curriculum. It takes teachers who are dedicated to teaching for Black lives, and it also takes resources, it takes time, and it takes a community of support. And I've been really lucky to be a part of this National Rethinking Schools community, and I feel like I'm still finding and helping to build that community here in New York City. So I just want to end by inviting you all to help do that with me.
Good afternoon. My role with Rethinking Schools comes by way of being a teaching artist and an author. And my access to young people is by being a writer that goes to schools and does special workshops. I did a lot of work at DreamYard, and Alondra is a student at DreamYard, and that's where I met her under Ellen Hagen's direction of the BPP program. And working at DreamYard was my early experience of realizing that Black lives are invisible in classrooms and in literature. And as a writer, a young adult author, it was really sad to me that students didn't know Black authors, didn't know Black poets, and this is in New York City, didn't know Latino poets. And so I know that I made it a mission to make sure that when I was going into the classroom and integrating into the curriculum with the ELA teacher, that I was making sure I was coming alongside them to show other writers that exist, not just men, not just white people, not dead white men, but living contemporary artists who are creating and making work. I thought I would open with an excerpt from Piecing Me Together, because it really is the anchor of why I teach, why I think it's important to come into the classroom alongside students and help them feel seen and visible. In this moment in the book, the main character, Jade, she has a mentor, and she's at this meeting with her mentor and the other girls who are in the program, and they've asked the girls to write down a question. I don't know how many women have been in this situation. You write down the question anonymously, put it in the box, they're gonna shake it up, take it out and answer these questions. And my character, Jade, is trying to think of the question she wants to ask, because so far, the questions have been kind of shallow about beauty and makeup tips and dating advice. And she's like, I got real problems. So can we have a real conversation? And so she's trying to think of what to say. And she kind of feels like these mentors are a little bougie and out of touch. Sabrina ends the night with a talk about following our dreams and believing in ourselves. You have to believe you are worthy of love, of happiness, that you are worthy of your wildest dreams coming true. When she says this, so many thoughts run through my mind. I am thinking about how Mom had plenty of dreams, and EJ is not short on self-confidence, and Lily has known she wants to be a poet since we were in middle school, so it can't just be about believing and dreaming. My neighborhood is full of big dreamers, but I know that doesn't mean those dreams will come true. I know something happens between the time our mothers and fathers and teachers and mentors send us out into the world telling us the world is yours and you are beautiful and you can be anything, and the time we return to them. When I watch the news and see unarmed Black men and women shot dead over and over, it's kind of hard to believe this world is mine. Sometimes it feels like I leave home a whole person, sent off with kisses from Mom, who is hanging her every hope on my future. By the time I get home, I feel like my soul has been shattered into a million pieces. Mom's love repairs me. Whenever Mom's cooking is simmering in the stove and EJ's music is filling every inch of the house and I am making my art, I believe everything these women are saying about being worthy of good things. Those are the times I feel secure, feel just fine. I look in the mirror and I see my dad's eyes looking back at me, my mom's thick hair, thick everything, and that's when I believe that my dark skin isn't a curse, that my lips and hips, hair and nose don't need fixing, that my dream of being an artist and traveling the world isn't foolish. Listening to these mentors, I feel like I can prove the negative stereotypes about girls like me wrong, that I can and will do more, be more. But when I leave, it happens again, the shattering. And this makes me wonder if a Black girl's life is only about being stitched together and coming undone, being stitched together and coming undone, being stitched together and coming undone. I wonder if there's ever a way for a girl like me to feel whole. Wonder if any of these women can answer that. Thank you. So the articles from me that are in the book are reflections on teaching in the classroom under the questions of how do I help young people not feel seen, but be seen. Like, actually, how do I see my students for who they are? And so a lot of times I'm asking young people, what breaks you? What puts you back together? And we have a conversation about both of those things. A lot of times when I first go into the classroom, I'm sat down and the teacher, because again, I'm not full-time, I'm a guest, so I get this really quick rundown. Oh, these kids are this way. They're probably not going to really write for you. They're not really that engaged. That one is this one is that. Those are, you know. And so I have this picture of how they are seen in this school, the reputation they've built for themselves. And I have to go in and see them with fresh eyes and ask them, how do you see yourself? What do you want me to know about you? I know what the record says, I know what you did last year in school, and I know the trail of paperwork that's following you, but who are you really? And who loves you at home, on your block? Who are the people that you lean on? Even if they're not the traditional family members that sometimes adults feel like, well, if you don't have that parent in the house, then obviously you have no one else that loves you. So I'm asking young people to put on record for themselves what is going on in their lives and trying to listen and take them in. I'm also asking not just for their pain, but for their joy, and understanding that both of those is important. It is very important to critique, right? To say what is wrong with the world. I'm asking students to look at how other artists, singers, dancers, writers, theater folks have talked back to the world and fought for justice through their art making. But I'm also asking them not just to be angry, because I want them to, though, be angry. I want them to know that it's okay to be frustrated with what's happening in our world. But I also want them to celebrate. So the balance of critiquing and celebrating where you come from, knowing that you can love home and that home is a complicated place, that there are things you want to change about your neighborhood, but there are also things you love and people there who you know love you. And so we're writing poems about that and making sure that there's a balance so that young people are not feeling depressed and oppressed by the curriculum. It can be a lot, right, to look at these systems, know you're a part of the system, and maybe feel powerless. So hopefully they're finding their power through their voice. And I try to say, I'm not giving them a voice, just providing space for them to share their stories and to share their voice. So a lot of just a few practical things that I've done and that is in the book are having young people engage with what's happening by reading news articles, looking at the stats. What are the statistics they're saying about your ethnic group, your age group, your neighborhood, and how are you going to use that in this poem or in this song or in this play and talk back to that number? Can you take something from this news article or a speech and remix it and make a poem with those words that maybe are hateful, full of stereotypes and assumptions, and you're turning and twisting the words? And then I always ask them to take action. I think it is the brave thing to tell your story on paper, right? And to get it out, and maybe even just to do a pair share in the classroom. So I asked them to do the next brave thing, which is take it outside of the classroom, because I really am hoping that young people are seeing themselves as activists no matter how old they are, and that it doesn't have to be that you lead a march or you make this grand speech, but it can be the smaller things, right? And so building that into them so that by the time they're adults and out in the world, they have been all along being activists and being active in their community. So if it's going home and do this lesson with your younger siblings or with a loved one at home, post it online, tell someone what you did today, record yourself saying your poem and post that recording, just so that they're getting in the process of sharing their voice and not being afraid to take up space. I want to close by talking about something we say a lot in children's literature especially, and this is research that was done by Rudine Sims Bishop. And she has this theory that we talk about a lot in children's literature about windows and mirror books, right? So a mirror book is you look into the book and you see your reflection back at you. The character might look like you, come from a place similar to how you grew up. The circumstances feel familiar, and you're like, man, this is my story. Have you ever read a book and you're like, does she interview somebody who knows me? Because this sounds just like, So that's a mirror book where you're just like, yeah, I get this. Then there are window books where you're looking out into the world, into somebody else's story. And it is my hope as a writer of children's literature and also as an educator that I am bringing both to young people, so that my library in the classroom is not just the mirrors for the students I teach, but that there's a balance of window books there also. And that as a writer, I'm not just telling stories with a single lens, but that I'm thinking about the world that our young people are growing up in and living in, and how can I create stories for them that reflect that world. I write realistic fiction, so it needs to be real, and it needs to be diverse, and it needs to have, again, the joy and the pain, the struggle and the triumph. And so that's really important to me, and it also helps me remember that these books that have brown faces on the covers, this book that is about teaching for Black lives, is also appropriate and necessary and critical to have in classrooms where the students may not identify with the girl on the cover, right? So whatever we think of the opposite classroom, an all-white, male, private school, they need to be reading books about and by brown people, right? They need the curriculum that's in this book. Thank you. I think a lot of times we couch the conversation around the marginalized people, the people of color, and we know how it feels. We know what this is, right? So it's important that we're also thinking about teaching in white spaces this curriculum and books that can help white folks and white young people think about the world that they're living in. Speaking of taking action, I'm going to close with a poem from the book. There's a moment of police violence in the book, and the kids want to do something. They want to use their voices and make change. So they hold an open mic night, and they're raising money for the family. And this is a poem by one of the students that she says at the open mic. And while I was writing this book, the backdrop is Sandra Bland and the beginning of the Say Her Name movement. And so I originally, none of that was in the book, but I felt like I could not write about a Black girl living in today's time and not mention what's happening to Black bodies and the bodies of Black girls. And so this poem is about that. Black girls rising. Are Black bodies sacred? Are Black bodies holy? Our bodies our own. Every smile a protest, every laugh a miracle. Piece by piece, we stitch ourselves back together, this Black girl tapestry, this Black body that gets dragged out of school desk, slammed onto linoleum floor, tossed about at poolside, pushed over and pushed onto grass, arrested never to return home, shot on doorsteps, on sofas while sleeping and dreaming of our next day. Our bodies. A quilt that tells stories of the Middle Passage, of roots yanked and replanted, our bodies. A mosaic of languages forgotten, of freedom songs and moan prayers, our bodies. No longer disregarded, objectified, scrutinized, our bodies our own. Every smile a protest, every laugh a miracle, our bodies rising, our feet marching, legs dancing, our bellies birthing, hands raising, hearts healing, voices speaking up. Our bodies. So Black, so beautiful, here, still, rising, rising. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, all four of you. That was amazing. And if you're not convinced by now to run out and purchase this book, I don't know what you're waiting for or what else you need to hear. But we are going to have a book signing at the end, and you'll get to dialogue. We're going to have some opportunity to dialogue right now. I'm going to use my bully pulpit to ask a few questions myself before I throw it open to the audience, but get your questions ready, and we have microphones in the back for you. The first thing that I'm thinking as I've been flipping through the book and listening to you speak is there's so many different things here. There's poetry, there's parent voices, student voices, there are lesson plans, there's like sociological articles and arguments. Like, how does one use this book?
I could start on that if y'all. There is so much there, right? That you could teach just the art of the book. And in fact, we had a training at my high school yesterday where the art teacher was going through and looking at how they're going to use the art to teach for Black Lives Matter at School Week. Amazing. Right? The poetry in the book. The poem that really stands out to me is 2 sets of notes. And it describes how black students have to take 2 sets of notes, one that they're being required to for the class, and then the other that's the truth, right? Right. There is political essays, like and policy programs, right? We go to the Movement for Black Lives and take their education policy and just print that chapter in there. And then there's role plays and activities to do in the classroom. So there's a myriad of ways to use it. I think some of the things just to highlight for me that is special about the collection that we put together is that it really highlights the intersectional nature of Black identity. It understands that, yes, we as Black people all experience institutional racism, and that's a commonality. And then there's also so many intersecting identities and forms of oppression that we have to understand that Black people don't all experience the world the same way, and we have to understand Black women's struggles, right? And so we have chapters addressing that. Black Muslim identity and facing Islamophobia as well, so there's a chapter on that. Afro-Mexican identity and looking at that intersection, and so I think that's really important to our approach to teaching for Black lives.
Well said. Any others want to chime in on that?
Sure. So I teach at a private school in Oregon. I teach teachers mostly. And so we require them to use the book because it's multifaceted, right? So as a budding social studies teacher, there are lesson plans in there that they can take right out of the book and use those. But there are also pieces in there by parents. And so, like, what should you be thinking as a teacher, no matter what child you're teaching, right? So, as Renee said, so most of my students are becoming teachers, and they're teaching in white schools, and they need to have this book. They need to understand the policies, the procedures, all the things that are happening in the Black community and the communities that intersect with Black identity, as Jesse just mentioned. So we use it in a multifaceted way. And then just as a Black parent, I think parents really could benefit from having this book to know what's going on in schools and how can you fight that. Again, there's so many great lesson plans in there, many of them by Renee and Adam. And so if you're a parent and your child is coming home and they're learning, whacked out history, you could say, how about this? Try this. And we have lessons in there for K through 12. So I think that's another way that folks could use the book.
I think there's a spirit in the book that's, something you said just sparked this. There's a spirit of, it's both trying to challenge and push teachers and a certain kind of generosity and patience with teachers, especially teachers who seem well-intentioned and are willing to meet you halfway. Can you say something about engaging, as colleagues or as parent to teacher, something about what's the most constructive way to engage somebody when you see a colleague, doing something, or the teacher of your child doing something that you wish they weren't doing?
Yeah.
I didn't prep them with that one. That was just from the heart in the moment.
I can talk about, colleague to colleague, I've definitely been in the situation of witnessing something that is inappropriate. Whether, again, intention doesn't matter, impact does. And so that's where I start. Like, I know you probably didn't mean to do that. I understand, all of that. You got to do the preamble so that they know that I come in peace, but still that was not okay. I think it's okay to have honest conversations with people you care about. I care about the teachers I'm teaching with. I care about, the folks that are at the table saying they love young people. And I believe that they got into this work for great reasons. And so some of them just don't know. And so, I think it's okay to, not in front of everybody, not make it a scene, but just have a conversation and not talk around it. Because if you talk around it, it's just going to happen again and again and again. So I think a conversation and then maybe some tools. It's saying, I'm gonna say this to you and point out what could be different, and then here are some examples of how to do better next time. Yes, it could be the book.
Here's a letter to a teacher.
Or other, but really just helping them with some resources. That's my approach.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter, Dear White Teacher, is worth reading if you're a white teacher. But I think something that I pointed out in my presentation is that you have to look at the systemic nature of this, right? So individual teachers are doing things that are wrong and need to be corrected. But we also have to look at the institutional level, the textbook companies that are creating these master narratives. And so it's not surprising that there are teachers making these mistakes and covering the history when you look at what's being funded. And so my wrath is not directed at that individual teacher.
Right.
I want to correct that teacher. But my anger and my energy is going to be focused at how do we transform the educational system and really a political and economic system that has billions of dollars for these corporate textbooks and high stakes testing, but not the money for a health counselor, a restorative justice counselor, et cetera.
Those are great answers.
Before you move on, to piggyback on that, I mean, I think what both Jesse and Renee were saying in terms of teachers needing the tools is so crucial. And I think what the book does is it gives some tools and it begins that conversation. And I think also, in a broader sense, subscribing to Rethinking Schools is a crucial tool that we have. And part of what we try to do through the magazine is highlight teachers who are doing this right because they're and have some tools that they want to share. Right? Because I think, as Jesse said, right, like most of what you're given as a teacher is these corporate textbooks. And so we need to really kind of from the grassroots build alternative tools that we can give to teachers and share the tools that we are building on our own, often in our own classrooms, with others.
Thank you. Last question, and before we throw it out to the audience, is just thinking about how the times have changed. I mean, I think people have been teaching for Black lives and fighting and organizing for Black lives for a long time. All of those things aren't new in a sense, but there is something new that developed and came to the surface in the form of movement for Black lives. In some instances, called itself the Black Lives Matter movement. And then, as you say in the book, as you describe, it sparked this idea of Black Lives Matter at school, day, and then week. All of that actually bubbled up in the Obama era. And the police killings and the specific movement, it seems like there was a radicalization among teachers, students, that also then happened in schools. It's kind of easy to forget that because of what's happening now,
right,
where we have this extreme white supremacist presidency. But I guess it makes me want to ask you, in what ways do you see teaching for Black lives, what you're trying to do inside and outside of classrooms, how has it changed or not? And in what ways?
So I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I feel like I can't answer that question. I can say, as an author going into schools, I think it is more palpable. It's always been, I mean, like you said, none of this is new. I think people are talking about it a lot more, and frankly, a lot of white people are talking about it a lot more and asking questions and wanting resources and wanting to know in a way that I didn't see before at large, right? And I think, there's a lot I could say about that, but I'll just say I'm glad that now it is not a conversation that I feel like has had to happen in a closed door where the people of color are getting together with a few white allies and kind of like talking about it. Right now it feels like a wide open wound is happening in the country. So we're all just trying to heal and help each other get through it. And in that way, it feels very good and palpable. You can feel it. When I go into classrooms, I can feel the sense of urgency more than before.
Yeah, I would add that I just think that every single movement for racial justice throughout American history has always had a central component of it around education. So you can look at slavery and how slaves would sneak off and teach each other how to read and write because they knew literacy was crucial to their liberation, right? Or you can look at Reconstruction and how actually there were black and white students sitting next to each other in classrooms during the Reconstruction era, something that wouldn't happen again for a long, long time because black people rose up and demanded public education for the first time. And you can look at the civil rights movement and the freedom schools and the Black Panther Party liberation schools, right, that were central to those movements. And I think we're beginning to see that again today be central to the Black Lives Matter movement is demands around transforming our education system. It's really exciting. I think that part of that reason for starting under Obama was raised expectations of black people. We have a black person as president, but we got a hole in the ceiling of my classroom and it's just raining in and flooding out. You know, we have completely segregated schools and we have horrible curriculum, right? And so I think there was that contradiction helped to fuel the movement. But now, when you have a president that says Africa and Haiti are S-hole country, right? Are S-hole countries. The kind of pain and trauma that causes our students, when that is the message being put out about black people from the highest office of the land, that creates a new urgency. Right, to counter the master narratives that are coming out from the very highest office of the land. And that is what this book is attempting to do, is humanize our black students, give them a new tool to resist the white supremacy that is rampant in our society.
Thank you. All right, so now I invite you to just line up at the microphones and, you know, and I think comments are just as fair as questions, but it is nice to have questions to the authors. And I'm going to alternate between the microphones, so don't just get yourself at one. Let's start over here.
Hi, hi Jesse, Adam.
Hi, Gia.
These are friends. Just so everyone knows, we started if you're a teacher and you're interested in this, we did launch this in New York City last year with the national movement. And so if you're interested, I don't know how, but maybe some of us are in the room that helped organize in New York City, and it was amazing. We did all kinds of partnerships with museums and places like that. So if you're interested, raise your hand if you were part of it last year. There's a good group of people here. Please join us. We would love to have this spread in New York City. We're the largest school district in the nation.
All right, thank you.
Right on. Yeah, it was 20 schools, 20 cities.
You want to say?
Yeah, just so folks know, there was over 20 cities that participated in Black Lives Matter at School Week last year, and it's grateful for your leadership and folks here that built it in New York.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the book and very timely piece of literature in the times we're in of confusion here in New York City and in the country and in the world. My question is this: I've heard you kind of elucidate on it about grassroots efforts of teaching, but I didn't hear clearly stated, where do you see liberation theology and intersectionality of interfaith base? I don't care if it's Hinduism, Islam, or Christianity, Judaism, or whatever the faith may be, morally and spiritually interacting with the whole education, because in the African-American community, our history in this country has been where African-American religious institutions like the AME Church and others were at the vanguard of educating African-Americans, starting colleges and so forth. Right. So in the book, is there any reference to the importance today, like Dr. King said, he's not in the pulpit on Sundays, he's in the streets across the nation being a Christian, a real Christian. So where do you see the religious responsibility impacting on this work that you're doing educationally, because they can't be separated. It's a marriage there that's eternal. So where do you see that role with progressive ministers from any faith? Even Minister Farrakhan will be instrumental to conversate on this very important issue. So where do you see that crossroad coming together as a marriage and impacting not just for African Americans, but for all citizens of the human family? Need to be, history is for everybody. So if the truth is taught through the religious and the educational system with some moral and ethical principles of integrity, how can this advance the narrative of real freedom, respect, and equality for all people?
Thank you. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, you raise a great point and question, and I think you're right that there's been a long intersection of faith-based institutions replacing what our government should be able to do in the world's richest country, but often doesn't have that interest in building a liberatory school system, right? Because if it was fully provided, then we'd have a very different system. And so you've seen so many different examples of faith-based institutions and churches playing the role of teaching Black history when it was completely ignored. And I think that's a legacy that's really important in our country. I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. First, I just wanted to say thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm Sharice Tyus, and I was actually pushing for these kind of changes back in the 90s when multicultural education was being funded. Dramatically funded. And I just want to remind everybody that Louisville, Kentucky schools had to sue for the right to have African American history taught. That was what I was up against when I was pushing for authentic voice African American and multicultural education at the time. Everyone in this room needs to understand that it's more than just the book. It's what you do in your school. And you have to unite. You have to find the supplemental funds. You have to use your ESL funds. You have to go up against your school district. You have to unite if you are going to impact the change you want to on the children. When I was coming along, I got resistance at every turn in every school system. And I can rest assured, based on what I'm hearing about the curriculum that's coming out of Texas right now, removing, Rosa Parks, removing Rosa Parks from the schools, from the books, and Hillary, you are going backwards at a fast speed. So I'm just suggesting to everybody here, from my experience in it, that you not only heed the words of what's in this book, you insist to your principals, you insist to your school district that you will not take no. Salespeople cannot do it by themselves. These individual authors cannot do it by themselves. They need you educators to push hard, and also talk to your universities, because one multicultural educational class for a teacher is not enough.
Add any comments? Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zakiya Ali, and I want to give a shout out to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture.
Right on.
Y'all should become a member, society member. I also want to encourage everybody in here, you can't do it this year, but get your students involved inside of the Junior Scholars and the the Teen Curators program, so expose them to that. And kudos to the panel for writing this book, because it is a framework for other educators to be able to begin to see exactly how we can reimagine education. So I think my question is, how are you all defining the term Black inside of the classrooms, where identity is so germane to a lot of the students that we have in our classrooms and across the nation? And also, I noticed that you all kept on referring to enslaved African people and African American people as the slaves. So do you make any distinction inside of your book around using the terminology enslaved as opposed to just calling them the slaves?
Great. Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah, I can start on that last part. I think that's a really important
change that has been made in a lot recently in terms of a lot of scholars taking up using enslaved people, right? And when I use the slaves in the curriculum, I always put it in quotes because it's often like, this is someone else saying this, right? Like I'm giving you another scholar's piece. But when I can, I think always we should change to enslaved people because those terms humanize, right? And so typically, and I think we should be frank with students about that. So I'm not 100% sure how you dealt with it in Teaching for Black Lives, but I know in the Rethinking Schools book that I've been working on around kind of this unit around teaching a people's history of abolition and the Civil War, we definitely do go into that and talk about why we try as much as we can to change the words from the slaves to enslaved people. I think that's crucial.
Mm-hmm. And one note we have in the introduction to the book, in terms of your question on the word black, we note that we capitalize the word black because that was something that was fought for in the movements, and then we also, as I said earlier, take an intersectional approach to understanding that there's many different black identities, from black immigrants' identities to black LGBTQ community and so forth. And so that's I think the general approach that we take. And then there's a specific chapter on understanding how the division between whiteness and blackness was created historically, right? And so looking at Bacon's Rebellion and looking at the first laws that were created to distinguish race, right? And to give certain privileges and fully move towards black enslavement and categorize that. So we look at the category of race historically, right, and understand how it was constructed and not as a fixed meaning for once and for all.
And by the way, I forgot to mention that Jesse and Diane are among the editors, along with Wayne Au, the co-editors of the volume, and Renee and Adam are contributors. Next question.
Hi, my name is Tyree Kristen, and I am one of the newest additions to the DOE through Teaching Fellows here. Thank you. So I am special education teacher in the South Bronx. Yeah, my background actually before this was in admissions for one of the top PWIs in the country. So I skipped over doing college counseling, become a teacher to see what's actually going on in the classroom, which I'm learning a lot so far. So I have plenty of questions, but I think one of the things that I have been struggling with a lot is, so one of the things, I believe Jesse, you spoke about it, was that the combination of pretty much whitewash narratives of the curriculum plus zero tolerance equals a lot of school to prison pipeline, which a lot of us, I believe, get. And using restorative practices to kind of like help kind of curtail that. At the same time, how do you build in accountability, student accountability in the classroom where we are not coddling them and that they are actually growing up, and as well as not, I'm not sure if it's fake or not, but if administration, not staff, but administration is predominantly white and the students of color are seeing them as their safety nets while the teachers still have to teach and they're playing this game of, oh, but such and such and do this, such and do this, and they're pretty much undermining the power of the teacher, and they're actually not getting the kind of lessons that they're teaching. They're not actually holding themselves accountable for doing the work and the rigor and behavioral issues, and they think that they could kind of just do whatever they want. Again, understanding that I probably come from broken homes and all this other systems of oppression, how do we actually build in student accountability so that when they do get into the real world, however long that takes them, when they do get into the real world, they're actually being prepared for real life, regardless of whatever life they want to live. Sorry, that was like a long narrative.
So I would start by saying that I think the real accountability problem lies in a country that has, let's start with my city, like one of the richest cities the world has ever known. Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks, Amazon, the two richest people who have ever lived are blocks from my school, and yet we just displaced 2 teachers, lost our health teacher and our PE teacher last week because we couldn't, right, afford to keep them in our building. And so we do need to talk about accountability, but I think we have to start there, because those kids who are in that PE and health class now their lives are totally thrown up in the air. The relationships they built with those teachers now are severed, and now they're entering into my classroom and a bunch of other classrooms now disconnected from the first month and a half of school without those relationships. And then we say, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way? Right? And I think we have to start by saying we live in a deeply traumatic society, a society that causes harm to our children. It causes, there's racist trauma, right? There's physical trauma, psychological trauma, and we don't have the mental health counselors at our schools in the world's richest country to help nurture these kids. And I think we need to flip the question a little bit. And I think we need to, start by understanding the best discipline method that I have in my classroom is my anti-racist curriculum, right?
That's true.
The reason why I have never sent a kid to the office at my school is because my kids know when they get there, they're joining the fight. Right? They're going to fight against everything that they hate in this world. They get to come in and talk about it and join this struggle. And that is an incredible experience that can transform our understanding of discipline. And then we need to bring in, I think, supports for kids who have, challenges on top of what many of our students are dealing with. And I think starting there, we're going to find that we have a lot less problems and disruptions in our classroom, and that's how I generally approach that. I don't know if people have other.
Because we got a lot of people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Precious, and I'm also a teaching artist. I'm a visual journalist and a digital archivist in the way. And I work at a national nonprofit that supports professional development for teachers, educators, and school administrators to advocate for arts equity in their classrooms. So my question is kind of two-pronged. Since I work at a historically white institution, it's an art institution, what are some ways that, people who are in the periphery of educational work, so museums, libraries, art galleries, performance arts venues, can support educators like yourselves? And as well, what can, Black educational administrative professionals like me, what can we do in the positions that we're in to further the work for you as well?
Well, you could put on events like this.
Yeah, I was thinking, field trips that are curated in a way that it's not just about students coming to see something, but actually learn and interact and understand history. Pairing classics with contemporary or classics with work that is more invisible that maybe people don't know because they're by women or by people of color. Working with schools to create curriculum around some of the art pieces and welcoming them into the space. I think a lot of times it can be intimidating for young people to visit some of those spaces, and also teachers are like, look, I don't have time to also, I'm gonna chaperone the trip, but I have to now think of an activity for them to do and a whole different lesson. So if there's some type of way that you all could provide that, and the Schomburg is great at doing that here in New York City, I think those kinds of things are great resources for schools.
Yeah, we should talk. Next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Beatrice. I am a pre-K teacher this year. So I'm asking the panel, how would I use this resource to start my pre-K students to let their voice start to shine at a younger age? So that way, it starts from the bottom.
Yeah.
By the time they get to
sure.
junior high school, they're more confident and within themselves.
I was about to say that. Okay, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you do.
So all three of us said, oh, you should read The Black is Beautiful lesson by Cara Henderly. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name right, but definitely Black is Beautiful. We have several articles in the book, and also Adam mentioned Rethinking Schools, the magazine. It's a journal that comes out quarterly. Every issue you're going to see lesson plans and philosophical pieces too about teaching kids about race and so on and so forth. And like I said before, it's K-12, so you'll get something, or pre-K-12 I should say. So you will definitely get help with the little ones and helping them think through those ideas too in really powerful ways. So there's the Black is Beautiful, and what were you going to say, Jesse?
There's one other, like Brown Kids Can't Be in Our Club.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. That's worth looking at. And you realize that you know, young students, preschool students recognize race already because we live in a deeply racist society. And so if they understand that, when we have to start teaching about it and not be afraid to talk to young students about that, and there's already exclusion going on, and there's suspensions going on in preschool. And so we take up some of those issues in the book. So thank you for raising that.
I just want to add, picture books are also really good for that age group. If you're looking for diverse picture books, We Need Diverse Books is a great resource that has by category the issues that the books are about. And I think it's important too, especially when you're thinking about picture books, is again, not just the I get biographies, yes, please, but also just stories where Black kids are being their everyday Black selves, and not about the, you know, the history of us. So yeah, I think there's several resources for those little ones, for sure.
One other last recommendation is Rethinking Schools also puts out a book, Rethinking Early Childhood Education, that I would really recommend.
The Black is Beautiful lesson is the last piece in the book. It's by Kara Hinderly, and I actually saw her at a conference recently do this lesson for those of us who were attending her workshop. It was fantastic. I highly recommend reading the story of how she taught it to her kindergarten class. Next.
Hello, my name is Candace Sanders, and I wanted to thank you all so much for putting the book together and coming out speaking with us. Adam, especially for your changing the way U.S. history is taught, the way that you teach it, and inspiring others to teach it. I wanted to know if you had any ideas as to how to encourage teachers to have higher expectations. I work with the DOE, New York City, in an alternative high school program, essentially a GED program, and by the time kids get to us, they are beat down. They have no sense of self-esteem. They think that they cannot learn, and many of them are very, very smart. But they come in with second, third, fourth grade reading levels, and the teachers are in a bad place. They're in a bad environment, and that comes out. That comes out in the classroom. The children are blamed. Students are blamed. They need higher expectations.
Yeah.
Any ideas that you might have?
I'll just say that I agree. We need higher expectations. I think one of the problems is that the way that's being framed in our society today in this achievement culture is that high expectations mean a higher test score rather than learning how to collaborate with one another to solve a problem in our society or to challenge an injustice. And I think that when we reframe what achievement looks like, then we can actually engage students. When the thing that's on that page is the key to their liberation, then they're going to learn how to read it. But if it's right, if it's just this irrelevant passage, reading passage that they have to select A, B, C, D on, you know, and they don't see how that connects to their lives, the learning process becomes much more difficult. So we need to dramatically raise the expectations, right? Both, you know, academically, but also the subject areas, and then I think we'll have better outcomes for our youth.
All right, we are rapidly running out of time, so we're going to have to keep both questions and answers more succinct.
Thank you. My name's Marissa. This is my 4th school year teaching art in public middle school. And so I just wanted to highlight a resource that I love. There's a 12-year-old black student named Marley Diaz, who had put out this challenge. She didn't see herself reflected in her curriculum to find 1,000 books where black girls were the main character, not a side character, but the main character. And she's actually accumulated more, I think, thousands of books, but the website will list the first 1,000 titles that she found. And I wonder if there is something similar for teachers. For example, this book would of course be in that list, or if there's a larger resource or network that can kind of put all of this together so that we aren't just looking for the random titles, the awesome organizations, and we're all kind of uniting and putting them together in one place.
So, I mean, one resource I know that does that is Teaching for Change, based in DC. They do a number of curated lists around books for a variety of themes. And Rethinking Schools partners with Teaching for Change around the Zinn Education Project. So a lot of the books that are recommended on the Zinn Education Project website directly come from a lot of those lists that Teaching for Change has curated. So that's the best ones that I know about.
Let me just plug the Black Lives Matter at School.com, and if you click on the teaching resources, there's a big long list there.
Hi, my name is Shireen. My question for you guys is how or when do we create a more inclusive curriculum for other opposed groups of people? As a person who's always tried to teach Black history in the classroom, I find my Hispanic students, my Filipino students, my Native American students asking, that's nice you were doing that during the Civil Rights Movement, but what were we doing? So or do you think it's important that we start with the African American experience first?
Great question.
Yeah.
Speak up.
Well, yeah, we're all to
I've got a lot to say, but
well, one of the things I always ask or have my student teachers ask is, so what were other groups doing during this time period? So the question that they're asking you is the question, I think, to ask them. So we've studied this group, what were Native Americans doing at this time? Or what were different groups doing? So that it is like, this is United States history. United States history isn't just one group, it's all of us. And we all have a piece into every single part of every single year that we're ever going to study. And that's, social studies, like it's probably a little different in other content areas.
I think also, well, first, when is the time? The time is now, absolutely. We need that curriculum and we need to write it. But I think also, it's not just like, I teach at a majority Latino school, and I think often Latino history is thought of as like separate from Black history. And I think it's also about trying to understand how these histories intersect. I think one of the things that I just learned is that during the Chicano walkouts in '68, one of the schools that walked out was a vast majority Black school. Right? And so these histories are interwoven. And I think we do, as educators, have to do a better job about how do we bring these histories together as we're teaching them.
Just wanted to add to Gia's comment about the New York City organizing group, the Black Lives Matter Educators Group. The email address is blmeduny@gmail.com. The first meeting is on October 25th. So if you're interested in joining the group, it's blmeduny@gmail.com. And one of the organizing educators and I are working on a children's book to illustrate the 13 Black Lives Matter principles. So that'll be added to the mix of resources for early education as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Wanda. I'm a fiction writer, and I'm most interested in that I think parents can use your book as a tool to protect them their children from going to prison. I feel like it's an urgent matter, and I would like to talk about what I can do to help bring about money to help parents to read your book. I was recently observing a television show on Netflix about the prison system. And it seems like it's treated as being in college. So I think that your book is so important, and I just want to say that that's something I would like to help with. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get a comment over here. Is there somebody at the other mic? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Andrew, and I'm actually an early childhood education major at Birmingham Community College and studying racial issues. And why is it that some of our hardworking black students here in New York City are almost being stopped and frisked by the NYPD when they are trying to live a life that is free of tolerance? How do we change that? And why isn't the NYPD being held accountable in some of those circumstances? How do we change that?
It's a good question.
I'll just say briefly that I think that is about restructuring our society. It's a huge challenge to take on transforming an unaccountable police department that we've seen in this city and across the country shoot down black bodies without any repercussions, right? But my hope is that the Black Lives Matter at School movement can show the broader movement some lessons about how to fight and how to win, right? So in Seattle, this movement rose up by bringing together parents, students, teachers, our unions, community organizations, and we won ethnic studies in the Seattle public schools. And I hope that that kind of example of coalition building with specific demands can then broaden out to other structural changes in criminal justice.
Okay, we're going to take two more, and then we're going to have to close. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kendra Patrick. I'm a college student who currently tutors incarcerated youth in a juvenile detention facility. And currently, we've had a situation where the students were assigned a reading that was completely racist. And as a tutor, I can't alter the curriculum, but I wanted to give get some advice on how can I enforce this information to my students.
What I would just say briefly that I think when you get a racist text, it's a great opportunity to reveal how they want to maintain the society of inequality and racism that we have today and teach it that way, right? Yeah. Teach it as something to examine in the critique, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hi, name is Myri. I'm one of the organizers of the Black Lives Matters of School nationally. So welcome Jesse, welcome Adam, welcome everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to challenge everyone here today to be a part of the movement, Black Lives Matter of School. You sign up, go to the website. There are also other organizations within New York City, AQE, Alliance for Quality Education. You have the CEJ, Coalition for Educational Justice. During the summer, I was invited to a forum where we analyzed the tests that happened in New York City, and we analyzed some curriculum. We found out that the Teachers College reading curriculum that they have here available in the 4th grade, there are 11 white authors, no authors of color. In the 10th grade, there are 10 white authors, 1 black author, no Latinx or Asian authors. So this is a problem. So we are just on the steps of City Hall last Thursday, challenging the mayor to make sure that this becomes a part of the movement forward. So I urge everyone here again today to be a part of the movement, sign up, and in your schools, take it back to your schools, and there's funding there in schools to buy this book, purchase this book, and just spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it back to our authors and editors here to just give a few last words, however short you would like to be. And I want to please ask you not to bum rush them when this program concludes. I'm going to blaze a path through you for them to be able to seat themselves in the lobby and sign books and speak to people there. So thank you for your cooperation with that effort. Thank you for coming. It's been a really incredible conversation. Before your last round of applause, let's just hear a last word from our authors.
Yeah, so sometimes when we go to an event like this, we feel, oh, yeah, you're just preaching to the choir. But I grew up in the church, and I like to get a witness, and I like to hear an amen.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I want to say thank you for helping us bear witness to all these issues. And it's just October, so we've got plenty of time to make a difference in schools, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's really an honor to be here with you all and to be at the Schomburg today. Thank you so much for coming, and I just want to say that I'm excited for what this Black Lives Matter at School Week could be here and the way that this movement could reach a whole different level this year. We got for the first time the endorsement of the National Education Association, the biggest union in the country. So now we finally have some institutional support. So thinking about this movement growing and the hard work that you'll do, beginning to teach Black history now, not waiting until that week, so that week has a lot of meaning behind it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to close, seconding that, especially since Myri just spoke, it reminded me that, as much as the NEA supported it, here our local union did not. And I think, and Myri was the person who got up in front of the union to try and motivate them to support it, and it was unfortunately voted down. And I think it's the only union in the country where it was voted down. And I think we can change that this year. And especially if all the educators in the room get involved, I think we can change that. So, right on.
Remember hope, remember joy. I just want to make sure that our young people have both the struggle, the resistance, and also the love of their people. And take care of yourselves. This work is hard and it is a lot. So make sure that you are also nourishing yourselves and coming to these events and getting fortified so you can go back out and do the great work that you do.
Thank you all. Gather your stuff.
Mine's just right out.
Cool, yeah. Do you want to get a picture together?
I'd love to.
Let's do a group picture with maybe the book.